Welcome to A Recipe Reborn, featuring your favorite foods from Final Fantasy XIV. Hello, my name is Lemon Drop, and I recreate dishes by combining real-life culinary inspiration with the in-game recipe, description, and thumbnail. If you're into 14 and food, please subscribe and click the bell for a new episode every Tuesday. Today I'm making Skybuilder stew. If you've been working on the restoration of Ishgard, you're probably familiar with this recipe. During my research, I learned there is an Acadian or French-Canadian maritime recipe that's similar to chicken and dumplings called poulet de fricot. Since Elizons are more or less the Eorzean equivalent of French people, this was my starting point. All of the listed ingredients are from the first, so the in-game recipe isn't much help. To make the real-life recipe truly Ishgardian, I've chosen to add a few ingredients relating to the area. Starting with tomatoes, the description says they were developed and perfected by the House Zemel botanists. Solstice garlic is found at vendors in all major cities, so it's easy to come by. I looked to ingredients harvested in and around Kurthus for more inspiration. Lover's laurel or bay leaves grow near the twin pools, and you can find Dravanian paprika or peppers near the Watcher. Both pearl sprouts and chives are found under the Black Iron Bridge. Cyclops onions grow in both the Dravanian Forelands and the Diadem, which are accessible via Kurthus and Ishgard, respectively. One last detail about Ishgardian food comes from the Encyclopedia Eorzea, which indicates a recent increase in the use of cheese in their cuisine, so I'll be incorporating that as well. A rail is a small bird that lives its life on the ground, so naturally I'm using chicken. The description says the rail fell in the pot, and using a whole bird would be fine, except I find that thigh meat works better in stews and never gets dried out. I'm starting by browning both sides, and I'm doing this in batches so I don't crowd my pan. It doesn't matter if they don't come out fully cooked, since I'll be cutting them into small pieces and stewing them later. Onions work really well to deglaze a pan, so I'm giving them some time to sweat before I scrape up the brown bits. Next, I'm making a roux so my stew comes out nice and thick. I know this is done when it starts smelling like a pie baking in the oven. The in-game recipe says to use water, but I'm using chicken stock. It's not that complicated, it just tastes better. I'm giving it a stir before adding back the chicken, which you can see I've cut into bite-sized pieces. Next are my pearl sprouts, aka Brussels sprouts. These take more time to cook through, so I'm adding them early. If your sprouts are large, you may want to cut them in half. This is a good time to season, but there will be another opportunity to taste and adjust later. Here is my lover's laurel, aka bay leaf. I'm going to let this come to a simmer while I make my cheesy dumpling dough. The cheese I'm using comes from the province of Quebec and is named after the town where it was developed by Trappist monks, but you can use any Alpine-style cheese like Swiss, Emmental, or Gruyere. I think chives go pretty well with cheese, so those are going in here too. If you're going to give this a try, I recommend mixing until a ball is just barely formed. If you still see a little bit of dry flour, that's okay. I'm going to stop right here. I'm almost ready to cook the dumplings, so I'm adding in the peppers and tomatoes. Once the dumplings go in, I can no longer stir the stew, so this is my last chance to season, so I'm going to give it a taste and see where I'm at. Needs a little more pepper. One last stir before I drop in my dumplings using 2 spoons. The goal is to make these approximately the same size so they cook at the same time, and I'm keeping in mind that I can't move these after I drop them in, so I'm being really careful about where I place them. Cover it up, and about 15 minutes later, this is done and ready to serve. This smells so good, and if I'm being honest, this might be one of the best tasting recipes I have ever developed. The chicken flavor is really intense. The Brussels sprouts just melt in my mouth, and they're ever so slightly bitter and balance perfectly with the acidity of the tomatoes and the sweetness of the peppers. The dumplings are like cheesy clouds smothered in gravy. When you're basically spooning gravy directly into your mouth, there's really no way it could be bad. I hope you enjoyed my creative interpretation of Ishgardian food. For the full recipe and instructions, please check out the link to my website in the description below or in the card at the top of the screen. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week for another recipe and another episode.